Hi everyone. I've gotten some requests asking me to show how to make sourdough bread and how to make a sourdough starter. I'm going to post some videos on sourdough bread tomorrow morning, but I wanted to show you guys real quick how you make a sourdough starter. This is my starter. His name is Beeble the Food Dude. He was named by my friend Lael's kids, and I think they did a great job, so I labeled him. And this is a active, bubbly starter that is, you can see all the bubbles in it. It's nice and risen. I fed it about 4 hours ago, and it's ready to be made into a loaf of sourdough bread that I will let rise tonight. It's nighttime right now, and then I'll bake off the loaf in the morning. So there's a ton of recipes for sourdough starter out there, and a lot of them are complicated, and they don't need to be. There are reasons behind all the different things like pineapple or other types of sweeteners and stuff that people put into their sourdough starters. A lot of it's just to like give the yeast a little something extra to work with, but really a very straightforward starter can be made pretty reliably by just using flour and water and thyme. And what you're doing with this is you are capturing wild yeast from the air, from your hands, from your cooking utensils, from the flour itself, just anywhere that yeast happens to be floating around, and you're giving it an environment full of what it loves to exist on, so moisture and a starch to feed on. And you're leaving that yeast-friendly environment in a nice warm place. A little warmer than room temperature is ideal. So 75 to 80 degrees is what I've read. But if all you've got is room temperature, that's okay. It just may take it a little longer to get going. So what you're going to do to make a sourdough starter, it's really complicated, you guys. You're going to put some flour and some water in a container. And you're going for about equal parts by weight, or if you're going by volume, you're going for about 2 parts flour to 1 part water. Or if you're like me and you've fed your starters often enough that you don't even measure anymore, you're just going to eyeball it. So I've got some flour in here, and I'm going to add some water. And I'm going to stir it until the consistency is what I'm looking for. And the consistency of your starter is going to be the same the whole way through. So the consistency this is as I am first creating it, that's going to be the same consistency we're looking for anytime we feed it. So it's a little tricky to do one-handed. That's too thick. It's all clumpy right now. I'm going to add some more water. And this is a good thing to be able to eyeball it, because sometimes your consistency, even if you're like measuring by weight, or, I'm sorry, I'm making a mess of this video. How do I stir this and hold? Okay, I'm just going to talk, and then I'm going to stir, and I'm going to show you. So sometimes if you're measuring by weight or volume, depending on the different flour you're using, maybe you're using a different brand, maybe you're using whole wheat versus all-purpose. All-purpose flour, the same volume or weight of all-purpose flour will make a much thicker starter than if you were using whole wheat flour. So it's good to be able to know what consistency you're going for, so that you can kind of adjust your water amount depending on the flour you're using. So I'm going to pause this and stir it up real quick, and then I'll show you the consistency. Alright, I've got the consistency to where I like it, and I'm just going to go ahead and show you as best I can in this light. It's kind of like thickish pancake batter. You can see it has some movement to it, but it's not like super liquidy. So that's what you're going for. And again, this process is really not super precise, or it doesn't have to be. You're just giving the yeast an environment where it can grow and flourish. And what I then do with this, and you might wonder why I put it in a giant container. You could probably get away with putting this in a pint jar, but it will grow. And sometimes if you're in the process of like feeding your yeast and stuff, Sometimes it can grow more than you'd expect, and then maybe you just go a little bit above the edge of your pint jar, and then you have a mess. So I like to use a big jar. What I do is I just put a lid on it. I don't tighten the lid down. That lets some air in, so we don't have this like weird anaerobic environment, because yeast doesn't like that. And then I stick it in a slightly warmer than room temperature place. And for the first few days, you're not going to do anything. On the third day, you can start to feed it. And when you're feeding your starter, what you want to do is you want to dump out half your starter. And you don't have to waste it. I have so many jars of floury liquids in my fridge. It's fun. This jar is full of discarded starter. So this is, if I were feeding my starter, if it were time to feed my starter, I would pour out half my starter into this discarded starter jar. And this won't really make bread, because it just kind of sits around in your fridge and doesn't get fed. But what it will do is it'll give a really nice flavor to things like pancakes or even zucchini bread. And you can look for recipes online that use discarded starter. There's lots of them. And it just, yeah, it gives a really nice flavor to them. So I'm going to make pancakes with that tomorrow. But the reason you discard half your starter every time you feed it is whenever you feed your starter, you want to add, just like we did when we made the starter, you want to add some flour and some water to get this same consistency. And you want to add enough flour and water so that you just about doubled the volume of however much starter you started with. So if you did that like without discarding any starter first, you'd very quickly have like a giant vat of starter on your hands, and that would be bad. So yeah, on the third day, start feeding your starter. Feed it once a day for about a week. Check on it, see how bubbly it's getting. As it starts to get more active and bubbly, you can feed it a little more often. When you start to see the level of bubbles, like it'll bubble up and then the bubbles will start to settle. And that means it's run out of food, basically. So as you see the bubbles, as you see the levels start to settle down again, you want to feed it. Once your starter gets to the point where it's doubling in volume anytime you feed it, then it's active enough to make bread. And it should smell nice. It should smell yeasty and fresh and kind of a mild scent. It shouldn't be super sharp and pungent. If it smells like acetone, that is a very definite sign that your starter has used up most of the energy that it can get out of the flour and needs to get a couple of feedings to really get it rejuvenated. And I walk through that in another set of videos. But that is how you make a sourdough starter. It's flour, water, and patience. And I will point you to the site that I have loved for learning sourdough. It's called theclevercarrot.com. And her explanations have been the most clear, the most helpful that I have found in my nerdy sourdough research. And she doesn't, like, she tells you all the stuff you need to know, but she also doesn't go, like, so crazy into detail that it's really overcomplicated. So I would thoroughly recommend checking her out. Again, it's called The Clever Carrot, and she also has a book out all about different sourdough breads, and I totally want it. Yeah, so check her out, because most of what I'll be telling you is just like her stuff rephrased, because I'm a fan. All right, I hope that helps. Feel free to let me know in the comments if you want to know anything more about sourdough. I'll be posting videos of actually making the bread tomorrow.